Hi, thank you so much for being here. I am the Traveling Stitcher over on Instagram. Magnolia Nest Designs here on Flosstube and Etsy, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you are spending part of your day with me today. Thank you so much. This is my second Flosstube video, and it will be a WIP parade for end of 2023, start of 2024. And I need to start by saying thank you so much to everyone who was part of giving me such an amazing reception on my first video. I made it knowing that this community is generous and kind and caring and uplifts people, but I also made it knowing that it's the busiest time of the year, or it was then, I think it was a week before Christmas, that there are an enormous number of floss tubers who make fantastic content and that people are very time poor. And so I didn't expect anything. I expected very few people would watch it. And that's just because of, as I said, how busy I knew people are, and how many other amazing people there are to watch. And so I was completely blown away, and I still am, and I'm so grateful. It was the best way to finish the year. So thank you so much to everyone who watched my video, who commented, who subscribed. It means the world to me. And I have to give a special thank you to Pfeiffer, who is so kind and always goes out of her way to share her knowledge and uplift people, for the shout out she gave me on her Flosstube video, which I watched it not anticipating. And I got to that part and I just started crying from the lovely things that she said about me. It was so kind. So thank you, Fauna. Thank you, everyone. And if someone has let you know about my videos and suggested you watch them, please let me know who they are, because I would like to thank them personally as well. I'm going to say the thing all floss tubers say, even though it really goes against the grain of my personality, which is that if you enjoy this video, please do subscribe. It means the world to me to be able to share my stitching with like-minded people after, you know, a lifetime of sharing with people who care about me but aren't really into stitching. I'm sure that makes sense to all of you. It's so amazing to have a community of people who are passionate about the things that I'm passionate about, and that's what I'm here to share with you today. So I've got 13 WIPs to share with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I do things and why I do things that way throughout this video. Part of what I want to do with these videos is to do what I call the Cross Stitch Academy, sharing knowledge through it and inviting conversation so that we share with each other. And I haven't thought ahead to anything specific to include in this. If there's something that you would like to hear more about, please let me know and I'll focus on that in a future video. But for now, as I go through my WIPs, I'll just talk about the how and the why of the decisions I made along the way, and maybe that will be interesting to you. And if you're someone who already has very set ways of doing things and you have some things that you'd like to share on how you do things, then please, I'd love to hear from you on how you do it, because I'm learning all the time from this community, and that's one of the things that I absolutely love about it. So this is the first WIP. I call this chart autumn because I don't speak either of these languages. And I haven't bothered to put it in Google Translate. This is a Lurker-esque kit, and I feel really guilty saying this, but I found it at a charity shop, and I bought it thinking, well, I can use the threads for something, because I just assumed from being there that someone had made a start on it, and I didn't, if it was like a big start, I didn't really feel like finishing the work of someone I didn't know, because their stitches would look different to mine. And I got it home and I discovered that while it had been opened, it was a brand new kit, and I love it. And so I started this in about 2015, and it's just, the quality of this kit is absolutely fantastic. The threads were pre-sorted. This picture is really well done. I will say I find it slightly more saturated in the picture, on the camera than it shows up in real life, and there was a time where I was a bit disappointed about that, but now that I'm more into the prim aesthetic, I'm not bothered by that at all. The other thing that I will say about it is that it is a paper pattern only, and I haven't been able to find a way to purchase it as a PDF, so it's not compatible with Pattern Keeper, and that makes it so much slower relative to some of my other WIPs. So here we are. This is 18 count easy grid Ada, and I will show you a picture of where it was at, please excuse the glare, at the start of last year. This is a page break, so I've got to the right and left and the top of the design. There's this page, and then there's about a page and a half below it, and again this is showing a little bit more saturated on this screen than it is in real life. Now I can't quite get this all in the camera at the same time. I've been trying for ages, I just can't do it. Everything goes wibbly wobbly, so I'm going to move it to you so you can see this side here is unchanged, but these trees, they were, you know, a lot of confetti to stitch. There's a lot of different colors in there, but they're so beautiful. I love them so much. And then we come over here. Now, there's a few stitches down here, but I'm going to focus up here so you get more of the design and the screen. So this carried on about here, roughly, and I've done just a wee little nibbly bit down here. Everything else is new from last year, and I did that by putting this on my Whipgo board. Whipgo is the brainchild of Jessie Marie Does Stuff on Flosstube and Instagram. It is a bingo board essentially, and you fill in either 24 or 25 of the squares with things that you want to stitch over the year, and then every month Jessie calls 2 of the numbers and you stitch what has been called, or you can make substitutions. Her overriding rule is it's your board, your rules, and I love that because that's the way I stitch as well. So I put this in twice for 24 hours each. So this is 48 hours of stitching. Now one thing you can't really see, I'm not very happy with, or maybe you can see like a very faint almost line here. I did the first page as a complete page, and then when I did the next page, you can see in person, not from a distance, but I can, a slight texture change with the stitches being pulled in different directions in the sky, particularly where it's all the same color there, for when it went from one page to another, and I don't like that. And so I've got away from it everywhere else by bleeding between one page to another, not doing hard ends. I do have a bit of a hard edge along the bottom. I don't see that as a problem because I stitch in lines, and so most of this throughout you'll see also has hard lines, and they don't show up in the way that stitching this way and then that way and then that way and then doing the same thing here does. If I stitched vertically, leaving the horizontal lines would be a problem, but because I go across and then back and across and then back, they aren't. I don't know if that made any sense. I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is that I wish I hadn't done that. And then I wish that I had known from the start to feather your edges between the pages, and that's what I do. Now this is gone across about 3 pages and you can't even see because I'm stitching them all essentially as one with no breaks in between, and so you can see if this carries down here you would be seeing the same thing here. It's not there at all. So that's a lesson that I learned while stitching this piece. This is 18 count easy grid. You can see it's very, very faint grids, much more delicate than what I have been able to purchase from 123 Stitch, and the quality is just lovely. It's really nice to stitch on. Alright, next up, this piece is called Mista. It's been a little while since I learned Tagalog, so that pronunciation may be a bit off, but it means the fisherman. I'm stitching this in kind of commemoration It's too strong a word, but memory of the time that I spent living in the Philippines in 2021 during the pandemic. It was a really interesting time to be there, and I did probably half or maybe a third of the stitching while I was there. Now what I decided was every time I live in a country, I want to stitch something that reminds me of that country. And so the reason I chose this one, I love the design, but also this artwork is by a Filipino designer, and it was translated into a cross-stitch pattern by a Filipino woman, and I really like that about it. So it's by Cross Stitch Designs by Irina. This is the full picture. You may be able to tell it's not a mistake that it's not there. I'm not stitching the background. Those greens and those oranges are really beautiful, but they're not my colors. And also that's a whole lot of stitching when I'd be comfortable with having the background. So I've darkened up these colors by one shade using the DMC color charts, and other than that I'm stitching it as called for. Now you need to be really careful with this chart or any chart by this designer, potentially, though this is the only one I've purchased, because it has a number of times, and it's because she has 73 DMC3 colors. She uses the same symbol in two colors, so she'll have the symbol, it might be in red and it might be in blue, and that's perfectly fine if you're stitching from the PDF or you're printing it, but in Pattern Keeper they both show up as black, and so it thinks it's the same symbol. And this right here is one example where this color and this color are the same symbol, but one's blue and one's pink, so you've just got to watch for that. But I think this is really lovely. Yeah, it's really, it makes me happy. So this is where I don't have a start of 2023 photo, but this is basically where I was at, except if you see this fish right here, I hadn't done it. So this was the before picture for that stitchy session that didn't include the rest of it, and this is how the rest of the design looked at the start of last year. And so you can see I've done a lot since then. I've done this part of the tuna, I've done this man's arm, I've filled in under the hat, I've added the fin, I've added these sections of clothing, I've started the pink, and then this was done, but all of these fish and the net, they're all new. So I'm really happy with that progress for last year. Same as with the autumn stitch, I put this on my Whipgo board twice for 24 hours each, and that gave me a lot of progress. I didn't realize before quite how much progress 48 hours of stitching could bring. Now I use a timer on my phone, and I start and stop if I'm not actively stitching. If I'm having any sort of a break, like a Flosstube video is ended and I'm starting another one, I pause it. So it's 48 hours of true stitching. But it makes a huge amount of progress, and I'm really happy with that. Now this is stitched 1/1 on 28 count, and I'm using all the called for everything. The pattern in total has 88,500 stitches, and Pattern Keeper says that I'm 84% complete, but what I did was I marked in all of the background as stitched to start with, because it wasn't obvious in some places where the background was and where the chart was, and so that 84% is not correct. Because I did not do those stitches, but I am a good chunk of the way there. All of this is done. I just have to finish this corner. So I'm hoping to get a long way along on this piece this year. Alright, next up, this is a free chart from Heaven and Earth Designs. This is what they call it. I call it Regeneration. I'm not interested in having something in my house that's about something falling apart. I want it to be a place where people draw strength, not where they lose it. And so Sorry, I've got like this really tiny little ring light, and this is my art light. Apologies for the glare. So to me, this is a dragonfly that is healing its wings, and it is drawing strength, and it's making this magical power circle around itself. And so I call this regeneration. It's another large chart. This is the only one of my WIPs that I did nothing on last year, so I don't need to show you a before picture. This is where it was at the start of the year. I made it a UFO because I've made a little stitching error and I couldn't figure out where it was, and it all felt a bit hard, and so I put it away. And what I've decided since then is that I'm going to grid my fabric, and I'll use that to repair it, and I'm not going to rip anything out. I'm going to just stitch what's right around it, and this is background, so it doesn't matter if it's not quite right now. The colours aren't showing as well as they should, but this is pinks and greens and blues, and it's actually really, really beautiful in person. This chart will have 158,400 stitches. I've done just over 4,000 stitches, so it's 2.77% complete. I mean, you can see how big it is. Oh, it's a little bit intimidating, but that's okay. This is 28 count Lugana white again, and I am stitching it 2/1 10 stitch. I've never done 10 stitch before. I'm not sure I love the effect, but I've seen a lot of other people do it, and I love, oh, that's showing the colours a bit better, and I love their pieces, so I'm confident that as I get further along, that I'll completely love it as well. And my goodness, the speed. There's something magical about only having to do half the stitch. All right. Next up is the Shores of HWR Hollow. Now, you might or might not know, depending on whether you've spent some time following me on Instagram, but I did Woman of the Mayflower by Brenda Gervais, and I did a major change of it to be focused on my family's migration story. I'm doing a similar job on this, in that I love the sampler as it was charted. This is by Carriage House Samplings. The designer's Kathy Barrick. I love her work. It's brilliant. And I saw this and I loved it, or I wouldn't be stitching it. I'm not meaning to be critical at all, but I saw it and I thought, oh, this could be something that could be so much more meaningful to me. And I'd like to change it to commemorate the people that I have lost at sea, and change it up to reflect that. So I'm changing it to be 9x9, but it won't look like it's looking as I cover it, because there's a lot of changing the chart that's going on. So this is what I've done so far, and a lot, I mean, you can see there's a lot of border that's been stitched. Now, when I stitch borders first, I always stitch them in half crosses, because then if I make a mistake, there's a way less to rip out. But also, you'll see some of them look a little bit strange. Every 10 stitches, I do a full cross, and I count and count and count and count and count to make sure that's right. And that means when I know that it's in at the correct place, it's really quick to count down to 100 or 200 or however big it is. And it means my border is far more likely to be accurate than it would be if I was just doing it in crosses to start with. That might not be the case for you, but counting is hard. So it is the case for me. So this is the first block, and it's not finished. There's other things that I've put up the top that I just haven't stitched yet. I need to get onto. But as you'll see from this is an amalgam of 2 blocks. It's this block and it's the whale, because I loved both parts. And I've added words in it that are not anywhere in Kathy Barrick's chart. I have used her style of having the first letter really large, but I made it my own, and I'm not sharing yet how it will look when it's finished, and that's partially because I'm holding space for myself to make design choices as I go. But I'm so excited. So this will be the last block, and it's double height. So this is the tombstone block. In memory of Lieutenant Jacob Pomeroy, anchored in the haven of rest, May 7, 1745. I don't intend any disrespect to Jacob, but I don't know who he is. So this is the memorial part of my sampler. So I have done this in memory of Sergeant Raymond Cyril Going, who is my great uncle, or possibly great uncle. And my family's family, we don't do first cousin, second cousin, step, any adopted. We're family, we love each other. That's all there is. So it might be great. As a family historian, I should know, and I have it written down somewhere, but I've always felt really close to Raymond, even though I never met him. And so this is in memory of him and other men in my family who were lost at sea. I stitched his name on the 80th anniversary of his death. And I'm going to put a plaque up beside the finished stitch in commemoration of these men and the other men who were lost with him. Raymond was a pilot during World War II, and these are some of the men that he flew with, and this was their aeroplane named Queenie. So the men who were lost without a trace with him were Sergeant Arthur Bridgman, Sergeant Frederick Willis, Sergeant Kenneth Eyre, Sergeant Emrys Weaver, Sergeant Francis Stewart, and Sergeant Clarence Breton. After the war, Luftwaffe records showed that Queenie was shot down by a Messerschmitt, a Bf 110 flown by Karl Heisch of the Night Fighter Wing, 33 miles northwest of Heligoland, headed to the Dutch Frisian Islands. Karl had shot down at least 8 planes at that point, and was himself killed in a flying accident only a few weeks later. Raymond is officially recorded as killed on active service and not killed in action because he was on a supply mission, not a combat mission, at the time that he was killed. But I'm considering, I'd initially charted the date killed on active service. I made sure it fits perfectly in North Sea. But I've since learned of a number of other men in my family who were lost at sea, and I visited the port where they died, and I want to make sure there's space to include them as well, and one of my friends who was lost at sea a few years ago. And so I'm considering doing KIA as an abbreviation. I don't see any difference really between action and active service. He was in a war in the Air Force flying a plane, and he got shot down. So it might be a slight inaccuracy, but I think that's what I'm going to do, to hold the room for the other men to be included. But yeah, so this is this piece. I'm stitching along with Tiny House Stitcher, who's also stitching a Shores of HWR Hollow design. Oh, not Shores, sorry, a HWR Hollow design. I think it's the Christmas one that she's doing, but I don't recall. But it's so lovely, especially on such a meaningful piece, to have the solidarity of knowing that I have a friend who's stitching one too. All right. Next up, much more lighthearted. So those were my BAPs. And that one, I should say, was started, I think, the 9th of February last year. So these are my large charts, and I use the same orders that Quirks and Stitches uses in terms of sizes. So BAPs, big, ambitious, or ARS projects, depending on your way of phrasing things. They're really big. They're 250 plus stitches. Add the dimensions, this side plus that side divided by 2, and that's the number you get. This is my large category, and there's 4 in it, and I'm showing them to you in the order that I started them, oldest to newest. So this one here is Emerald Forest. Again, it's another paper chart, so it's, you know, once you go pattern keeper for really long full coverage charts, it is hard to go back. So this one I started in 2009, and this was back when I would only have one cross stitch project at the time, and they were always large full coverage pieces, or large mostly full coverage, and I'd stitch them till they were done, and then I'd start something else. And this one I did a bit of it. There's another one I'll show you that I also started in 2009, and that's because I realized one of these things is not like the other. That eye is on an angle and it looks funny to me. Like, I looked at this so many times and it looked normal, but the moment I noticed that eye, I look at the piece and that's all I see. So I made it a UFO, or unfinished object. I stopped stitching on it for years, until I figured out what to do, and really that was a matter of waiting until I had the skills to rechart it. And so this is where I was at the start of last year. These are just screenshots from my Instagram page. I'm first and foremost an Instagrammer. And then this is where it is now, and you can see huge change. So this leaf here, which is only partially done, is this one here, and I've gone way past that. And then this is this line here, and I've gone way down, and there's holes all up in here, and I've filled them in. So I'm really happy with this. Again, Whipgo board twice, 24 hours each, so this is 48 hours of stitching last year. I did use, I think, 2 of those hours changing the charting of the eye. I'd already done it, and then I decided, oh, the head's on it ever so slight an angle, so it shouldn't be at exactly the same angle as the other eye. It should be down. I think it worked out it needs to be 2 stitches lower to look normal. So I was really tired, and I was like, no, I'm going to count that as part of my Whipgo time, because it's not stitching, but it's necessary for the stitching, so it's happening. And you can see, I'm sorry if I'm moving this too much. I'm trying not to move the camera. You can see that there's a huge number of colours in here. So in these seemingly white blocks, there's all sorts of pinks and blues and purples, and this eye is pure confetti. There's so many colours there, and it just has a stunning effect. So I'm not talking smack about the chart when I say I wasn't thrilled with how the eye was. For all I know, that's how the artwork looked. But it's been done absolutely exquisitely. Even in the black, there's lots of just 310, but there's also greys and there's purples and just little bits here and there. I think this is absolutely stunning, and I'm so excited to have it on my wall. All right, next up, Open Gambit. This was my birthday start, May 2021. This is a long dog sampler. You may already be familiar with it. This is how it looks in its entirety. And this was the start of last year. I am so happy with my progress. I did 24 hours, 1 Whipgo call on this one because it's a large, which is a smaller size. And I'd say that's a lot of progress for that amount of time, and that's only because it's just one color, solid stitching, just start and go, and I love it. So I'm stitching this on 18 count sand by Zweigart, and the thread that I'm using is DMC 310, and I love it. There are so many little things in here that you don't see until you're stitching them, and everyone says that about long dogs, but it's so true. Oh, I love it. Sorry, you might be sick of me saying that. I say it about everything, but we only stitch things we love, right? And if we're not, then I'm going to go out there and say I think we should be. Because it's a hobby that's meant to bring us joy. So I don't know if this is what the designer intended, but to me this looks a little bit like a mouse that the elephant's going to step on, and that makes me laugh so hard because of Aesop's fables. And I love these little monkeys, and I love how these things that they're standing on look individually like rooks, but then it's a castle altogether, and this is a castle, but these individually again are shaped kind of like castles. I mean, look at that right there. And so it's kind of like that game, how many triangles are there within this triangle? How many castles are there within this? I think there's so many different answers you could come up with already. And this upside down frog. I love it. So I'm doing 2/1 on 18 count, sand aided by Zweigart. I've done 8,994 stitches of a total of 26,551. So this is at 33.87% complete. I'm really hoping to do at least another third this year, but secretly, privately hoping I can finish it. We'll see. It depends on whether it becomes a focus project or not. Next up is my Christmas list by Silver Creek Samplers, and this is not my Christmas list as you may have seen it before. It's very different to the way the designer designed it. And again, I love this exactly the way it is. That's why I wanted to stitch it. This is Silver Creek Samplers. It's just charming, and the colour scheme that Priscilla Blaine did from Stitching with Housewives, when she stitched it, I saw it and I was like, oh, that's so me, I want to do it. But the title of it, My Christmas List, got me thinking, well, I want this to be my Christmas list. A lot of these things mean nothing to me. Turkey dressing, I've never eaten turkey in my life. I don't even know if it's for sale in New Zealand. It might be. Woolen sweaters are not something we wear in summer, so not for Christmas. And there's a few things like that, and then there's my family's traditions, and I wanted them to be reflected in this as well, so I've changed it up. Family visits became family gathers. In fact, I'll move this off camera so that I can hold this up, hopefully steadily. Family gathers, because my home isn't the centre of Christmas, that's my parents' home, so gathers was more relevant to me personally than visits. Turkey dressing became Danish tree, because we've always had a Danish tree in my home at Christmas. Woolen sweaters became fun and laughter. Caroling glee is Christmas blessing. Christmas blessing was relevant for me, but my family, we're really big on Christmas caroling, and we love to sing together, and so that was relevant to me, and I wanted to include it there as a memory. And then Flying Reindeer is one of the only bands, the only one so far, but there'll be a few later on that's in there exactly as charted. It's so much fun, and I loved it. Now what I did in changing it is I analysed to try and work out how the designer had done it, because I wanted it to make sense. And what I worked out is that it's a poem, which has 4 lines per stanza, and there's rhyming involved. And so family gathers, Danish tree, fun and laughter, caroling glee, it rhymes. Flying reindeer, that's the start of the next stanza. And so I think it will go really well together. I've charted most of it out already. To start with, I just scribbled out a list of this is what I want my poems to be, and then just started stitching. I've since finished most of the charting, but not 100%. But you'll see the style of these letters is the style that Silver Creek Samplers used in this chart, and it's because I love her work and I want mine to look in the same style as hers. I didn't set out to design a whole new thing. If I had, it would look completely different. I set out to make a couple of small changes to a sample that I loved to make it more relevant to me and my family. And those changes gradually added up till we got to the point where it's largely different. But that was incremental. It wasn't meant to be. So I love it. I hope you like it too. I'm so inspired by her work, and I love so many of her designs. Next is by another designer whose work, and I didn't show you my before, and this was at the start of last year. My Whipgo was to add 2 lines, so I added Carrot and Glee, flying reindeer, the birds in the tree, and the reindeer. Next up, this was a new start last year, so I don't have a before picture. This is another designer whose work I absolutely adore. The blue flower. Now you'll notice that most of the pictures I'm showing you are not hard copy, and that's the case even if I purchased it as a hard copy, even if I've been able to find them as a PDF. I travel a lot. I've lived in 3 countries in the last 3 years, and I know that if I keep things hard copy, there's a really good chance that I won't have it when I need it. So when I get a chart, the first thing I do is scan it into my iPad, and I use it from there. Or not iPad, it's a tablet. The ones that I am showing you in paper copy, I just happen to have handy, or they're my old books, and I haven't. It would just be such a pain to stitch from a multi-page book for the really big things on my tablet that I just haven't done it. But for most things, that's why. Anyway, absolutely beautiful. I love everything about it. This was my birthday start last year. The only reason I haven't done more on it is because this linen, which was the called for, is very soft, and so having it in a Q-snap, it was being pulled slightly off center, and I knew that then when I went to straighten it to frame it, it might not be quite as flawless as I would have hoped. And especially if you have to move the Q-snap, and so you pull it a little bit wonky this way and you pull it a little bit wonky next time. It's very important to try and straighten things up as you go, and you can get around it at the end, but it's easier if you don't have to. So I decided I want to stitch this in my floor stand, and I've just been waiting for it to come available because I only have one, which I've only got one set of hands and one brain and one set of eyes, so that's all I actually need. But it has slowed me down on this piece, but I love it. I can't wait to get back to it. And these delicate flowers, they're just beautiful. So I'm stitching this using the called for. I'm using the Lindy Stitches method. I am a stitcher on a budget. I've said that before. I'm not ashamed of that. I looked at the chart and I said, which of these colours really need to be the over-dyed? Where is it really obvious that it's an over-dyed thread? And this was one. And so I purchased the over-dyed thread. DMC's a lot cheaper. So where it wasn't a really big difference, I went with the DMC. I'd love to stitch over-dyed everything, but that just doesn't match my financial goals. So I use a lot of DMC. And the reality is, DMC is a really great product. It's by a French design company. If it was clothing, people would be, oh, French design house, amazing. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's a fantastic product. This is the last in my large category. My first in the medium category, and it doesn't feel like that size is right, but it's because it is long and thin. So this is Whispering Winds, excuse me, by Mystic Stitch, and I have cut it off about here. So I started stitching this in 2009. This is one of the most confetti dense pieces I've ever stitched in my entire life. One little square here, I counted it was black, and I used I think 97 different colours, and it just ended up looking black. And the effect that it gives is stunning. But one of the things I learned from this is not to stitch something big unless I've seen a really close-up picture of the model. I purchased this back when I didn't know you could buy cross stitch online. It came from a catalogue, and it was a tiny little picture in a catalogue, and I loved it, and I ordered it as a kit. And I realised when I was a long way into it that this man doesn't have a joint in his knee, and you can't actually see a face, and that was quite scary in terms of something I want to hang on my wall. So I decided, no, I don't really want that. And I've cut it off. Also, I followed the instructions, and I used 2 strands on 14 count, and I am a person who loves full coverage, and that just wasn't enough for me. And if it was 3 strands, I probably would have gone out more like this much done. But just 2, I'm happy with just having this be a really narrow piece that I hang in my home, and I will love it like that. It is beautiful. I just didn't have the commitment to do the whole thing at that point. So this was the start of the year. Now what I've done since then is I've pulled this out to where this furthest out stitch is the whole way. This is already the bottom. So that's my before. And here's my tangle of threads. This was before I'd seen how other people parked. And what I would do for parking is I would write the symbol and the thread colour on a piece of paper, and I'd stab the thread through it and I'd leave it there. It's so much easier to say I leave every thread in the bottom left corner or the bottom right corner or wherever it is, and do it all the same and not have to do that. But that's something I learned along the way. So this is my almost finished piece. Last year for Whipgo it had 24 hours, and that got me this whole length down here and a lot at the bottom. This year I'm stitching in a different way. I'm having a focus piece that will go on my floor stand, and my idea, which I reserve the right to change completely if it no longer serves me at any particular point in time, but the idea is to stitch it till it's done, and I can do any small or medium sized project that's not on a floor stand throughout that time that I want. And I'd like to. I don't want to be stitching just one thing because I know that then I'd burn out. But I have so many big projects. I want to just be getting finishes. And that's partially because there's new ones that I'm desperate to start. And I'm holding myself back because of these ones. So if I can finish them, I can start new things. And I would love to have this on my wall. I love this wolf. I didn't even know he was there for the longest time. A lot of people have seen it in person, haven't been able to see him. So I've done a couple of hours on this today. And all I have to do is fill in this area, which is not insignificant because of how confetti dense it is. I mean, this looks like one colour. It's, I think, 3 or 4. But that is what gives it this richness and depth and realism. And I love full coverage for the realism. And so it doesn't bother me. I would wish there was less blacks at times, as I mentioned earlier, but I'm happy to stitch all the blues. I love blue. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe I'm biased against 310. I don't know. But I watched the WIP parade by, I'm forgetting the name now, Handwork Maniac today, and she had an all black sampler, and now I'm desperate to stitch one. So maybe I'm not that maybe I'm not all that anti-black. Anyway, that's that piece. This is also apparently medium, which is, it just goes to show as Jen Quirks and Stitches said, when the formula is applied to very long skinny pieces, it doesn't work. This was a New Year's Day start last year. It's Barbara Anna Designs Dreaming Girl. You're probably already familiar with it. I'm stitching this largely as charted called for fabric, but the changes that I'm making is I'm changing the hair colour to be very, very red. I'm changed the neckline from a high rounded one to a slightly lower, this angle one. I'm losing my words. And I think, but I'm not 100% sure, but I think I'm going to give her a green top as well. But other than that, I'm going to stitch it just as it's meant to be. I love all the Dreaming Girls. I'd love to have a collection. This is the first one that I have done. So much fun. Alright, this is my New Year's Day start. This is a pitiful start. Until today when I pulled out the wolves, this was all the stitching I'd done this year. I had 6 days off. I never have 6 days off stitching. Ever. But I just got enthralled with the book and I read it instead. So this is Winter Cometh by Summerhouse Stitchworks, and I've just started in the centre top. This is 18 count opalescent Aida, and I'm stitching 1/1 with called for. Now this one is considered small. I have 2 small designs to share with you today, and they are both Prairie Schooler, and they were both starts last year. This is from the Garden Samplers book, and I'm doing this one here in the middle. I just love it. And this is how far I've gotten. Now, this is 18 count vintage country mocha. I hope that's focused. I think it's so much fun. I did a centre start on this one. I am stitching it in a Q-snap, which slows me down because I can only do one-handed stitching. I definitely prefer to do two-handed stitching. And I have given myself a generous margin in my vocabulary. It's about 2 inches. That's not enough for my Q-snap, but as a stitcher on a budget, I didn't want to have a huge amount of this very expensive fabric just to hold in the Q-snaps. What I've done is, this is calico fabric which I got years ago, and I've sewed it onto the edge, and it works perfectly as something to hold. And also because I'm holding it and not the fabric, I could make a ground guard. I haven't yet. It means that there's no issue with getting it in there. There's no issue with tension. It works perfectly well, and it's a inexpensive way to put fabric in a Q-snap. Last one, this is Prairie Schooler Prairie Seasons. I've stitched 2 of these for my mum last year. I did autumn and winter for her last year. I'd like to do summer for her this year, and maybe spring as well. I'm not sure if I'll have time. This is summer, so you can see I've made a very, very meagre start. This is 14 count coffee tea dyed Aida, and I'm stitching 2/1. And that's me. That's all I have to share with you today. Thank you so much for being here with me. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear any thoughts. Oh, excuse me for bumping you. I'm so sorry. I'd love to share any thoughts that you have that you'd like to share. I'd love to hear what your stitching plans are. I'm hoping that my plan of having a focus piece that I work on regularly on a floor stand interspersed with smaller pieces means that I will make faster progress than I otherwise would. So with my Whipgo board this year, I have most of the slots, 3 lines of them, 12 hours on my oldest whip, and that's the focus piece. And so my plan is to work through my oldest whips to get rid of them that way. Not get rid of them, to complete them. to get them off my list though, so I don't feel guilt in starting all the things, because there are so many things I want to start this year that are humongous. But I've put autumn optional because that one's so huge, and ideally, if I lived in a perfect world, I would love to finish Wolves, which I'm currently stitching. The Tiger will then be my oldest WIP, so finish that one. And ideally, Marmanga Mista and Opening Gambit, if I could go a long way to finishing them, they're already a long way done, that would be phenomenal. But if I do autumn, I'll get bogged down in it, and I could do a couple months and love it, but then I'd need to change. And so that's why I've put in here right from the start that focusing on that one is optional. I put the center one as Lucky Dip. It's a free space, but in the past there's been something I've been stitching on that I've decided at that time I'd like to set myself a goal to finish it and put that in there. So I'm openly holding space for myself to do that. And then the top row is Christmas ornaments that I make for myself and people in my family every year. And the bottom line is my 2 WIPs. They're the two ones with stars and this one. And then the 11th and 12th day of Christmas are the Peruskola series that I'm currently stitching. I've already done half of it, and I'd like to do at least 2 more on it this year. But last year I had a lot of goals for 24 hours. This year I've pulled right back because I'd like to have more time to design and stitch my own things this year. And I'm hoping that holding that space will now allow me to do so. Anyway, I've started tripping over my words. This is already a long video. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.